The back room of Donovan's saloon reeked of stale whiskey, sweat, and the sour tang of fear. Sunlight filtered through the grimy windows, cutting jagged lines across the floor where the shadows of two sisters quivered against the walls. Hazel's wrists were bound with coarse hemp rope, red and raw from the tight knots that bit into her skin. Beside her, June, younger and smaller, shook uncontrollably, her face pale beneath the grime. She swallowed convulsive sobs, each inhale a prayer she dared not speak. Across the room, Briggs Donovan loomed like a storm cloud. His grin, cruel and uneven, revealed yellow teeth as he circled them, each step echoing on the wooden planks. In the corner, Silas, a wiry man with eyes sharp as a rattlesnake, twirled a gleaming knife, its edge catching the dim lamplight. Two men, two shadows, and no escape. "You can't pay me in coin," Donovan growled, voice low and hard. "Then maybe you'll pay me in blood." Hazel's heart pounded violently against her ribs. Her mouth was dry, cracked from the cruel slap she had endured moments ago. June's wide, terrified eyes met hers, silent pleas burning in their depths. The younger sister was barely 20, too innocent to survive the night's horrors. Donovan's hand shot forward, grabbing Hazel by the arm. "You or her, your choice." His fingers traced the line of rope on June's wrist. A whimper escaped the girl's lips, slicing through Hazel's resolve. Hazel closed her eyes, feeling the weight of shame pressing her chest flat. Trembling, voice hoarse and raw, she whispered, "Take me, please. Just let her go." The words hung in the room, heavy and trembling. Hazel's pride was shattered, but she would give herself to protect the one family left to her. June sobbed, kicking at the ropes around her ankles. "No, please, somebody help us." Outside the saloon, a pair of boots struck the dusty boardwalk with deliberate rhythm. Rowan Hayes, a man weathered by 39 years under the unforgiving Texas sun, paused as June's cries reached him. He had come that morning for simple tobacco and a quiet drink, but the sound carried like a ghost from his own past. Memories of a daughter lost too soon, of promises broken by bullets and fire. He set his pack down, feeling the old ache in his shoulders deepen. Gray stubble shadowed his jaw, lines etched from years of unforgiving toil. The piano in the main room stuttered to silence, and the few patrons glanced up nervously, sensing the tension rising like dust before a storm. Rowan pushed through the saloon doors into the back, and the sight froze him. Hazel's shirt was torn at the shoulder, dirt streaking her skin. June trembled against the rope, eyes wide with terror. Donovan loomed over them, grin still cruel, hand gripping Hazel's arm. Silas shifted in the corner, knife poised. For a heartbeat, Rowan was transported back 10 years, to the night he had failed his own daughter. The screams, the fire, the helplessness. It all came rushing back, a scar across his chest. His jaw tightened, and his fingers twitched toward the revolver at his hip. Donovan's voice cut through the charged air. "This ain't none of your business, old man. Turn around now." Rowan did not move. He fixed his eyes on Hazel, the silent courage in her posture, the willingness to sacrifice herself. The air thickened, charged, ready to shatter. Rowan's heart hammered like a drum, old instincts rising despite years of restraint. He had sworn never to draw, never to kill again. But here was the choice, the moment to right a wrong decades in the making. Hazel's eyes met his for a fleeting second, silent desperation, lips trembling, words trapped behind the fear. Donovan laughed, sharp and cruel. "She offered herself already. Brave, that one. Maybe I'll take the younger just to be fair." June's cry pierced the room again, raw and broken. "Please, somebody, don't!" The sound ignited a storm inside Rowan. In one fluid motion, his revolver cleared the holster. The hammer cocked back with a metallic click, louder than any gunshot, a sound that sliced through the saloon's tension. Silas froze, knife mid-air. Donovan's grin faltered, twitching as fear spread across his features. "Untie them." Rowan's voice was low, steady, heavy with authority. It carried more weight than any yell could. For a moment, Donovan hesitated, eyes darting between the revolver and Hazel's fragile body. Whispers of the man Rowan Hayes had been, soldier, sharpshooter, survivor, rippled through his memory. The grin cracked. With a curse, Donovan yanked the ropes loose. Silas stepped back, knife clattering to the floor. Hazel stumbled forward, pulling June into her arms. They clung to each other, shivering, tears streaking their dirt-streaked faces. Hope, fragile and trembling, seeped through the cracks of their fear. Rowan kept his revolver ready, never lowering it, knowing men like Donovan understood only the hard edge of steel. "Get out," Rowan said again, voice firm. The words were law. Donovan spat on the floor, humiliated, but backed toward the door, Silas trailing. "This ain't over," Donovan hissed. The door slammed, leaving silence behind like a warning. Hazel's voice broke through the quiet. "Why? Why did you help us? You don't even know who we are?" Rowan holstered his gun, face heavy with memory. "Someone should have helped my daughter," he muttered, "and nobody did." June clung to her sister. "Are we safe now?" Rowan's gaze hardened, scanning the empty streets outside. "Safe? Not entirely. Men like Donovan don't forgive easily." Night settled over the town with an uneasy hush. The sisters held each other, as if letting go meant falling back into hell. Rowan walked beside them to his horse, the boards creaking beneath their feet. He lifted June first, her small frame shivering in the chill. Hazel followed, voice still trembling. "You didn't have to save us," Hazel whispered. "Now he'll come after you too." Rowan shook his head. "I've faced worse storms than Donovan, and I'm still here." His voice carried the weight of decades and scars of survival. The ranch looked worn but offered shelter. A single lantern cast long shadows over dry, cracked earth. Inside, he set out bread and poured water into tin cups. The sisters ate quietly, too drained to speak. Rowan watched, remembering nights of loss, nights when the chair opposite him had been empty because of his failure. Hazel finally broke the silence. "What will happen when he comes back?" "He will," Rowan said, gaze narrowing. "Too proud to let this go. But when he does, he'll find he's not the only one ready." June's small voice trembled. "Are you saying you'll fight?" Rowan let out a dry chuckle. One man, steady hands, clear conscience, enough to make a difference. The wind rattled the shutters, a lone coyote calling in the distance. Hazel's hand brushed against his as she passed, brief, fleeting, but a spark in the dark. "Why us?" she asked softly. "Why risk everything?" Rowan stared into the lantern's flame. "Too many times I stayed silent. People I loved paid the price, not again." A long silence followed, the kind that settles into your chest, heavy and deep. "And friends?" Rowan added quietly, looking toward the future. "If you want to see the rest of this story, if you want to know what happens when Donovan comes back, you need to stick around. Subscribe now, because this tale is far from over." Morning broke sharp and cold over the ranch. Hazel and June rose cautiously, eyes heavy with fear and doubt. Rowan was already outside, feeding his horse with slow, deliberate care. Hazel's shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders. She asked, "Do you really think he'll come back today?" Rowan's expression was unreadable. Men like Donovan never forget being shamed, and they always come back. June's hands trembled around her oversized coffee cup. "What if he brings more men, or lawmen?" Rowan stopped, scanning the horizon. "The law can be bent. Men like Deputy Crow have been in his pocket for years. He's worse than any outlaw." The sisters exchanged a glance, realizing safety was temporary. Rowan's voice, steady, firm, carried over the crisp morning air. "Stay inside. Don't answer the door. If trouble comes, head for the root cellar. Do you understand?" They nodded, fear shadowed by trust, a fragile bond forming in the heat of survival. Later, Rowan rode into town, heart steady, revolver strapped, eyes scanning every corner. The saloon buzzed with false cheer, but at a table, Donovan and Silas waited. Deputy Crow's badge glinted mockingly in the sunlight. "Well, well," Donovan drawled. "Old man thinks he can play hero. Paid my debt. Do those girls really walk free?" Rowan's eyes locked on his foes. "They are free, and if you touch them again, you answer to me." The room stilled. The storm was coming, but Rowan Hayes was ready. If you're drawn into Rowan's fight, don't miss the next part, where the storm rises and the town itself will face the consequences of silence. Subscribe now and follow the story as the Wild West comes alive like never before. The town of Redwater slept uneasily beneath a sky bruised with clouds. Dust clung to every corner, carried on a wind that whispered of coming violence. Rowan Hayes rode slowly back from the saloon, each hoofbeat a drumbeat of foreboding. Behind him, the sisters, Hazel and June, moved with cautious steps, shadows stretching across the dirt road. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon with streaks of gold and blood red. Rowan's mind raced. Donovan would not let the affront go unpunished. He was a man who calculated every slight, and he would marshal every ally, corrupt or otherwise, to exact revenge. The lawmen he'd bribed, the desperados he called friends, all would converge on the ranch. Rowan's jaw tightened. He had faced storms before, but this was different. This was personal. Hazel and June were now under his protection, and for the first time in years, he felt responsibility, not duty, not revenge, but something raw and human. Hazel glanced at him, eyes searching, wondering if the old man could truly protect them. Her fingers grazed the brim of her hat, brushing away sweat and grime. "Do you think we'll survive this?" Rowan didn't answer immediately. He scanned the horizon, noting every shadow, every tree that might conceal an ambush. "Survive," he said finally, voice low. "We don't just survive, we make sure the ones who brought harm answer for it." June tugged at Hazel's sleeve, her small hand trembling. "But he has so many men, how can one man stop them?" Rowan's gaze softened slightly, just enough that Hazel noticed. It wasn't tenderness exactly, it was acknowledgement. One man, yes, but one man who had seen too much to cower. "One steady hand can change a lot," he said. Back at the ranch, preparations began. Hazel and June, though weary, moved with quiet determination. Rowan had taught them how to check the fences, stack firewood, and keep watch. Each small act built confidence, and each moment of shared labor began to knit a fragile bond. Hazel found herself stealing glances at Rowan, noting the way his hands moved, sure, practiced, and capable. There was history there, not just in his scars, but in his eyes, which held memories too heavy to speak aloud. Night fell, and the first signs of Donovan's retaliation appeared. Distant hooves clattered over dry soil, and Rowan felt the familiar thrum of tension coil in his chest. He had prepared for this, yes, but anticipation never dulled the edge of fear. From the barn, Rowan pulled out the rifles, loading them with care. Hazel and June crouched beside him, absorbing every motion. This was a lesson in survival, a lesson in courage, and one Hazel would never forget. "Remember," Rowan whispered, "every move counts. Watch for shadows, listen for breathing, and trust your instincts." Hazel nodded, swallowing the lump of fear lodged in her throat. She felt her sister squeeze her hand, grounding her. Across town, Donovan gathered his allies, sable men and women, lawmen bought and coerced, and a few mercenaries with nothing to lose. Their plan was simple: strike hard, strike fast, and reclaim the power Donovan had lost in the saloon. But as the first men mounted their horses, Donovan hesitated, a rare flicker of doubt crossing his face. Rowan Hayes had earned a reputation, a name whispered in awe and fear. One man, steady and resolute, could unravel even the most calculated plan. The night air was heavy with tension as the two forces began their march toward the ranch. Rowan had placed the sisters near the barn, a small barricade of firewood and stacked crates, their first line of defense. He moved with deliberate steps, rifle ready, each movement silent as a predator. Hazel watched him, heart pounding not just with fear, but with a strange, unfamiliar admiration. This man, rough and scarred, carried more than a weapon. He carried integrity, courage, and a stubborn refusal to let history repeat itself. June whispered, "Do you think he ever feared failing?" Hazel didn't answer. She only watched Rowan, noting how his jaw tightened, how his eyes swept the horizon. He was a man defined by action, not words, a trait both terrifying and inspiring. The first confrontation came with a shout. Donovan's men, confident and arrogant, underestimated the advantage of the terrain and the resolve of their target. Rowan fired once, two, each shot precise, disarming and sending a message. The men faltered, realizing that the old stories of Rowan Hayes were not exaggerations. Hazel and June ducked behind the barricade, hearts racing as each sound of gunfire echoed across the plains. But it wasn't just fear that coursed through Hazel. It was understanding. This man, Rowan, was more than a protector. He was a reminder that courage and action could rewrite fate. As the skirmish continued, Rowan moved with calculated efficiency, guiding the sisters when necessary. They began to see his method, the rhythm in the chaos, and slowly trust began to solidify. Hazel's heart thumped in her chest, not just from adrenaline, but from a budding admiration, a respect that felt dangerously close to something more. Hours passed, and the fight ebbed as Donovan's forces began to retreat, regrouping for another attempt. Rowan, though exhausted, did not lower his guard. He checked the sisters, ensuring they were unharmed. Hazel brushed a strand of hair from her face, her hand lingering near his arm for a fleeting moment. "You did well," Rowan said quietly. Not a compliment exactly, but acknowledgement. Hazel felt warmth rise in her chest, fleeting and confusing, yet welcome. "Thanks for not leaving us," she murmured. Her voice, soft and steady, carried a weight that Rowan could feel in his chest. It wasn't fear this time. It was gratitude, deep and unspoken. June, sensing the quiet tension, tugged at Hazel's sleeve. "Don't get distracted," she whispered, voice urgent. Rowan allowed a small, rare smile, one that never reached his eyes fully, but softened the harsh lines of his face. "Stay ready," he said. "We're not done yet." That night, as they huddled near the fire, the wind rattling the shutters, Rowan spoke of the past, not his own story, but lessons learned. Hazel listened, absorbing each word. There was wisdom in his voice, tempered with scars that told a history she could only imagine. "You see," he said, "people think courage means never fearing, but courage, real courage, is acting even when the fear is unbearable." Hazel's hands clenched in her lap. I think I understand now." "You will," Rowan replied, voice low and steady. "By sunrise, you'll see that fear is just a shadow. What matters is the light you step into, despite it." June yawned, exhaustion finally claiming her. Hazel stayed awake a moment longer, staring into the flames, thinking of Rowan's words and the courage they demanded. And for the first time since the night at Donovan's saloon, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. Outside, the wind carried distant hoofbeats. Donovan was returning, that much Rowan knew. But the storm was different now. It wasn't just a battle of men. It was a battle for trust, for survival, and for the fragile bonds forming in the heat of danger. Hazel's eyes met Rowan's across the firelight. You've done this before, haven't you?" she asked softly. Rowan's jaw tightened. "I've had to. Too many times." He paused, eyes distant. "And too many times I failed. Not this time." A quiet promise hung between them, fragile and luminous. The night deepened, the stars scattered across the sky like silver sparks, silent witnesses to the brewing storm. If your heart is racing, and you want to see what happens when Donovan comes back stronger, and the sisters must face their fears, and maybe even discover feelings that won't stay silent, make sure you subscribe. The next part is where the final reckoning unfolds, and nothing will be as it seems. The dawn came cold and pale, brushing the horizon with the soft silver of early morning. The ranch lay quiet, deceptively serene. Rowan Hayes stood at the edge of the porch, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the horizon where dust swirled like a warning. Hazel and June crouched behind the barn, their hands gripping each other tightly. Fear was still there, but it had changed, tempered by trust and the courage Rowan had instilled. The distant clatter of hooves broke the fragile calm. Donovan and his men emerged like ghosts from the morning haze, faces set in grim determination. The town's corrupted deputy, Crow, rode beside them, his badge glinting mockingly in the weak sunlight. The sisters exchanged a glance, hazel green eyes meeting brown. The same question reflected in both. Could they survive this? Rowan's jaw tightened. He had faced storms. He had seen men die. He had carried regret and guilt heavier than any rifle. But this fight, this one mattered for reasons deeper than survival. For the first time in a decade, Rowan felt the possibility of redemption. Not just for himself, but for Hazel, for June, for every soul Donovan had tried to break. The first volley came as Donovan's men approached the barn. Rowan fired with precise calm, each shot sending a message, not just bullets. Hazel ducked instinctively, her pulse racing. She could hear the sharp report of rifles, smell the acrid tang of gunpowder, feel the wind of danger brushing against her face. Rowan moved like a shadow, guiding the sisters with quiet words. "Stay low. Watch for cover. Trust me." June's small voice trembled. I can't." "Yes, you can," Rowan cut in, calm but firm. "You already have. Every time you've faced fear and not let it win, you've already done it. Trust yourself." Hazel looked at Rowan, heart swelling, with a mix of awe and something she didn't quite understand. This man, scarred and weathered, carried not just weapons, but a moral weight, a resolve that seemed to radiate. And for the first time since that night in the saloon, Hazel felt a spark, fragile, hesitant, but alive. The skirmish intensified. Donovan's men pushed closer, confidence in their numbers. But Rowan had laid the groundwork. Neighbors, long oppressed by Donovan and Crow, began to emerge, armed with pitchforks, rifles, and courage born of years of silence. One by one, the townsfolk joined the fight, transforming the battle from one man against many into a stand for justice. Hazel and June followed Rowan's lead, moving with a growing rhythm. Hazel's hands shook as she aimed her small rifle, but Rowan's steady gaze met hers. "Steady," he whispered. "Your fear is not weakness. It's proof you care. Let it guide you." A shot rang out. Donovan stumbled, narrowly avoiding a rifle that could have ended him. Crow barked orders, frustration cracking through his calm facade. The balance was shifting. The tide of fear that had long ruled Redwater began to break. By mid-morning, the battlefield was a blur of dust and motion. Rowan's rifle never wavered, his presence a beacon of stability. Hazel, gaining confidence, moved alongside him, covering angles and watching her sister. June, smaller but determined, followed the rhythm of her sister's lead. For the first time, fear was a tool, not a chain. Rowan's eyes met Hazel's across the chaos. For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. The threat, the dust, the gunfire. He saw not just a young woman, but someone shaped by struggle, yet unbroken. The thought was dangerous, unfamiliar, but it lingered. Then Donovan broke through the barricade, fists swinging, rage etched into every line of his face. Rowan stepped forward, rifle lowered, but hand on the gun at his hip. "It ends here," he said, voice low and measured. Donovan laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think you can stop me? You're one man." "One man with justice on his side," Rowan replied. "One man who refuses to let the past repeat." The fight became close quarters. Donovan lunged, swinging a knife. Rowan sidestepped with the ease of experience, delivering a solid punch that sent Donovan staggering. Hazel and June, watching from the side, felt a surge of hope, one they had never allowed themselves to feel. Crow moved to flank Rowan, but Hazel's rifle barked, forcing him to retreat. Rowan's eyes flicked to the sisters, and for the first time, he allowed himself the briefest smile. They were more than survivors. They were participants in justice, in reclaiming their lives. The confrontation reached its peak when Donovan and Rowan faced each other across the bloody dirt. Dust clung to their boots. Sweat and grime streaked their faces. Donovan spat to the side, rage boiling over. "This isn't over. You'll regret—" "You've already lost," Rowan interrupted, voice steady. "Because you can't break people who have nothing left to fear. Not anymore." Hazel and June stepped forward, courage blazing in their eyes. Hazel's voice rang clear across the field. "You don't own us. You never did." June followed, small but fierce. "And the town isn't yours either," the crowd murmured, slowly swelling into a chorus of defiance. One by one, neighbors raised voices and rifles, pitchforks, anything that could signify refusal to bow to tyranny. The line had been drawn. Donovan, seeing the unity, faltered. Crow's smirk vanished under the weight of witness and consequence. It was not the law that judged him today. It was people, justice, and the courage of the few willing to stand against him. By noon, the dust had settled. Donovan and Crow were restrained, humiliated, and left to answer for their deeds beyond Redwater. Rowan lowered his rifle, chest heaving, body aching, yet his eyes lighter than they had been in decades. Hazel and June approached him, hands brushing against his weathered ones. A silent acknowledgement passed between them, a bond forged in danger and trust. Hazel's voice trembled as she spoke. "Thank you for everything. Not just for saving us, but for showing us we can fight back." Rowan's hand rested on hers for a fleeting moment, a gesture of quiet warmth. "No," he said softly. "You did this. I only reminded you how." June, always smaller but braver than she knew, whispered, "Will it ever be safe?" Rowan's gaze swept over the ranch, the town, the horizon. "Safe isn't a guarantee, but strength is yours now. That you can keep." That night, as the fire burned low in the hearth, the three of them sat in silence, letting exhaustion and relief settle into their bones. Hazel finally allowed herself to relax, leaning slightly toward Rowan. The moment was small, intimate, but it carried the weight of survival and trust. Rowan broke the quiet, voice softer than it had been all day. "Courage doesn't come once. It comes every time you rise, even when the world is against you. And love, well, love comes quietly. It comes when you least expect it, when life feels too heavy to carry alone." Hazel's heart ached with emotion she had barely allowed herself to name. She looked at Rowan, not just the man who saved them, but someone who embodied justice, patience, and a rare kind of tenderness. June, noticing the unspoken tension, smiled faintly. "I think we're home," she said. Rowan nodded, eyes sweeping the horizon one last time. "For now, and we'll protect it." The wind whispered outside, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust, the quiet aftermath of violence, and the promise of tomorrow. Hazel knew this. Whatever storms came, whatever threats lurked, they would face them together. And somewhere in that moment, under a sky smeared with stars and embers of the day's struggle, Hazel allowed herself hope. Real hope, for freedom, for family, and perhaps for love that could bloom even in the harshest of deserts. If you felt the thrill of the Wild West, the courage and the bond that can form in the heat of battle, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. The story of Rowan, Hazel, and June may have reached its conclusion here, but remember, every tale of courage and redemption deserves to be shared. And who knows, the West still holds secrets waiting for the brave.